Hi guys, so I'm Dave Reynolds. I work with Seed VC, which is working to help early stage B2B tech businesses grow. And we've got two really interesting VCs in the room today that operate at different ends of the market, I would say. So you've got a bit of a flavour here. I think that I'm going to start with a question that I think is probably on everyone's lips in this room, which is I'd like to understand at what stage you would advise a founder to bring in a senior sales lead and how you should reward them. Was that a good question, guys? Great, okay. So we can start wherever.
It is a very good question and a very pertinent question. I think we see, we focus very much on the growth stage companies, so companies that are about to expand internationally typically. And one of the mistakes we often see founders make is to hire the sales lead too early. They basically go in and hires a corporate sales guy who knows all about corporate sales processes and running sales teams, but actually you need to get the foundations in place first. We see tons of companies make that specific mistake, spending a lot of money on corporate sales teams. For us, it's really important when you scale internationally, especially, is that you get the demand generation done first, and then you hire a few maverick sales people first. Once you have those guys working and running and really humming and basically overwhelmed with incoming leads, then you can start worry about sales management. You don't need sales management until quite far along down the line. You need maverick salespeople first who can knock down doors and get the sales done, basically. Does that answer the question?
Did you answer the piece about reward?
That is not my strong suit. I think you would be much better placed to answer that question. I don't know anything about that part.
Okay. Yeah, actually, so on the reward front, so we invest pre-Series A. So the chances of a company at that stage being able to afford a senior sales rep senior sales VP is almost zero. But it does sometimes happen, and what tends to happen is our head of talent works across, has these conversations frequently where you offer a sort of a smorgasbord of different options. So it's either higher salary for less equity or options in the business, or more options for less salary. And it's very much a choice of the individual. The sales rep who wants to take that plunge into startup land, and you often do have to take a bit of a hit as pre-Series A. But in terms of the advice that we give, it's very much a paradox. Certainly for Series A investors, you've got a bit of the founders have got a gun behind their head saying you've got to hit certain metrics to be able to raise at a good valuation at Series A. So what if it's 100K ARR? Run rate in the month that you're raising, you've got to hit these metrics, but at the same time get product market fit, build a product, and motivate a tech team. So what you really should be doing in pre-Series A is very much hiring those mavericks. Totally agree, but also trying to scale up in that area as much as you possibly can. So decent enterprise sales coach, attending conferences like this, speaking to friends, trying to get tips and tricks at left, right, and center, as well as selling through partners as well. It's a very effective strategy.
On that partner point, so developing channels and so forth. If you had a startup that had a aggressive revenue share with a third-party partner, do you see that negatively affecting future investments in that startup if it rewards a third party with a large proportion of revenue? Does that make sense?
I think for our part, no, as long as it makes sense. I mean, it's okay to reward others. It's okay to share the wealth that's generated and the value that's generated. Obviously, it has to make sense for you. Your units of economics have to be in place. You have to be making money off of each sale. But other than that, I don't see it's not a limiting factor at all, not from our perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Doesn't change it, provided it's the right partner. It's a strategic partner that's getting you into markets that you otherwise couldn't have got into and doing it economically. Because the big challenge of starting up is that you don't have that brand or the distribution. So actually trying to service those clients yourself would probably put you out of business. And it's interesting that Amazon example. I didn't realize that was the proportion of revenue they generate through third parties, but provided you have a quite a balanced set of revenue streams, you shouldn't just rely on partners unless the business model is purely a partnership play. You should definitely have some direct sales through developing your own sales channel. But it's a much more expedient way to get going for sure.
Yeah, I think adding to that comment, I think it's really, really important to know your customers. If you're only selling through the channel, you're almost too far removed, which means that your product development, your whole program will not necessarily be suited to the market. So I think it's really important to have those direct contacts as well.
So lots of people in the room are in B2B and SaaS and technology. So it'd be really good to understand, and this is an opportunity for you guys, the market dynamics are changing in venture capital, and venture capital firms are having to innovate. And so I think VCs are in an arms race to deliver value. And I think it would be really interesting to understand how you deploy that value, and how you help everyone in this room maximize that value.
Why don't you start? Because you start earlier.
Okay.
In the earlier stage.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now there is a crisis of confidence in the venture capital world. You've got people raising 20 million or tens of millions. I had some guy from I studied with 10 years ago raised 20 million in 7 minutes on an ICO. So there's a lot of capital seeking hard and fast returns, and traditional venture capital really does have to evolve to. And actually, so with that large supply of cash and a lot of other VCs raising money, there's also a very limited supply of high quality founders. So it's become extremely competitive. For us, fortunately, we are at a spectrum of venture capital where very few VCs dare to go. So few would invest it off the back of an idea for obvious reasons, but. The way it kind of works for us very well, firstly in helping us to de-risk our investment, but also helping to add real sort of instant value to the founders, is this applied VC model. So it's not just cash plus advice, you're providing cash, advice and operational support through experts who would command a far above average market rate and would otherwise be completely unobtainable to the founder. So we actually hire them in-house within Forward Partners. And the way we do that is we broke the venture capital model by, traditionally there's a 2 and 20 model. I don't know if you're familiar with the fund economics, but you charge a 2% management fee to your limited partners, your investors, and a 20% profit on carry. It varies with different funds. But no one had ever charged 3% to the and you read in the FT probably every day that people are getting upset about management fees, but the fact was that we could deliver above average returns by breaking that venture capital model. So our LPs pay for us to be able to provide that value add service on the basis they can return the value to them. So it's really about hunting for, VCs have to eat their own dog food and innovate their own business models, and we're seeing that more and more. So.
I think from our perspective, we are in the other end of the spectrum. We are at companies that typically have around 5 to 10 million annual recurring revenue already. So it's for us the value proposition. This is very different. We are extremely focused on B2B and SaaS software, and that's what we've done for 25 years or something like that. And where we add value is very much in the experience, but also in the networks. So what we specialize in is basically taking European companies and helping them get into the US, and we can help open a lot of the doors both in terms of customers, but even more importantly, or perhaps more interestingly, also to strategic partners, strategic buyers. And one of our value proposition is helping basically break down those doors, putting you in front of the right people, and making you successful abroad.
Brilliant. So I wanted to open it up to the floor. We've probably got time for two or three questions. So has anyone got the first question? Great.
Yeah. Question, I guess, when you talk about investing in a startup, if you look at the actual founder in terms of yourself and invest more in the founder as well as the business idea,
is that for me? So the question was whether we invest more in the founder than the business idea?
Yeah, I mean, you look at a lot of the founder and his skill set and his methodology, his strategy, his motivation as well as the idea, or is it 80-20, what's kind of split between
I would say from our part, we invest at a later stage where everything is already established. So, but answering more generically, at that point we already know that the business is there. But the team is definitely super important, and I would imagine that at the earlier stages, the team is far more important than the idea, because you are bound to pivot a couple of times. Even companies at our end of the spectrum pivot, especially when they start scaling internationally outside of their home market. If they are from a small home market, as soon as they go outside, they recognize that there's competition they have never seen before and they haven't reacted to before, haven't had to react to before. So you see pivots all the way up there. And pivoting, that requires a team. That requires a team that can think differently and act differently and move fast, basically.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So at our stage, it is we often, the party line is it's founder, market, product. So it's like a holy trinity of things you evaluate. And market is probably one of those things that you should probably pick up in due diligence. So it's by the time you've got to that late stage, you should be fairly confident, even if it's a very nascent market, there's something there. Products, we build the products, we back ourselves to do a very good job and to execute effectively. So, to be perfectly honest, founder is probably the only variable that we can't control. and it's that's the whole point. We want founders who have the hustle. They've got something special about them. It's very hard to gauge that. We often speak to our own head of talent, and it's kind of like recruiting someone in a way. Well, it's not quite the same, but it's the same approach you would take to evaluating whether someone's going to be able to be an effective executor in a particular space. But it's definitely super important. And when you meet a great founder, you just know it. They leave you, and you're kind of dazzled, and you think we've got to get that second meeting in the diary. So.
Another question?
So you kind of covered all the positives this year, and I'm massively interested in this from a personal point of view. You've mentioned good founder and bad founder. What makes you absolutely want to get on the phone and book a second meeting, and what makes you want to run for the hills and meet someone, knowing that you're probably going to be putting 7 figures into a software company?
Great. So I think I heard good founder, bad founder. What are the signals? Great.
It's tough to boil that down to something we can easy and snappy. I think one of the things that we find with the companies we tend to back and the management teams we tend to back is that they have a vision, they have an idea, and they know what they're doing, but at the same time they're very, very open to input. And I think that's probably, from our perspective, we are going into a partnership with you, and that partnership is probably going to last for 5 years. And we need to have confidence that we want to work together with you for 5 years, right? And it'll be in periods it'll be very, very tense because things will not go as planned, and we will need to step in and help recorrect. We will be very close colleagues at times, working together day and night to fix a certain situation. That happens, and we need to know that you as a person are likable even in those pressure situations. You as a person will want to work with us to make the right decisions and make things happen. So I think someone who will listen to input and someone who has a vision but is also open to input. I think that's a really, really important trait. I'm sure there are many others.
Yeah, totally agree on both of those points. Particularly vision is fundamental. But on the personable front, it's very hard to know. I think I like this rule of don't hire assholes, but obviously try not to back them either, because it tends to bite you in the arse. But actually, it's funny. So when I joined venture capital, I actually got the help of an enterprise sales coach for those reasons. That I feel it's like closing a complex deal. And the big piece of advice he gave me, because he was hiring salespeople, was to take them to the pub. Like in that deal process, which is normally very formal. It's first, second, third meeting, term sheet, and then there's no room there to have any kind of social interaction with that person. So what I actually do as a matter of course now is actually normally on the second meeting, a little bit to take the edge off talks about valuation and term sheets, but also to get to know the person makes a huge difference. And there's little things that will make you instantly like the person, and ones that will make you run for the hills. And the one that I often see, and we almost sort of just don't take the next meeting, is if there's lots of kind of two co-founders, they're constantly talking over each other, lack of precision, so not knowing their numbers, not really having any interest in the legal process or in the numbers themselves, and finally just not being receptive to other alternative opinions, and sort of being a little bit sort of control freaky about their baby. And you can understand why that happens, but they're just bad habits that lead you to become very myopic.
Last question?
final thought.
No more? Okay, so I guess I think we've heard some really interesting pieces there that really should help founders. But I also firmly believe that a VC deal is just another partnership. So that founder fit conversation is really fundamentally important. And yeah, we'll all be using your line, Chris, because I think it resonates in this entire industry. So your panel, great.